Hello, viewers. Today is Wednesday, September 25, 2024. In today's episode, I'm going to continue my thought process on how the current war in the Middle East, the escalation of the war in the Middle East, would affect the U.S. elections, and more specifically on why Benjamin Netanyahu may be indirectly helping or affecting the U.S. elections in November 2024. So before we go into the episode, yesterday I incorrectly mentioned that Condoleezza Rice was Secretary of State during the first George W. Bush administration. Actually, she was not the Secretary of State then. She was a National Security Advisor. And the actual Secretary of State at that point of time was Colin Powell. So I would like to rectify that mistake. Then going on to this issue, I did talk about the escalation yesterday, about how Netanyahu is going or actually trying to get into some kind of a war in Lebanon, and he is provoking Iran to get involved in this war. So let's look at this war in specific terms. Let's say that Netanyahu continues with this war with Lebanon, and he also is most likely to go on a ground offensive in Lebanon. Even if he does that, most of the observers, even in Israel, say that yes, they can just go and achieve their objectives. They can go ahead and try to neutralize some of the Hezbollah command posts, and they might take out some of those Hezbollah military commanders and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we'll be back to square one, and the war is not going to deliver peace. So that being the case, it's kind of puzzling as to exactly what is the end game. We have a situation in Gaza where Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Forces have sort of neutralized Hamas, and Hamas's capabilities are completely neutralized and diminished to an extent that they are not going to become a big force anytime soon. Similarly, in Lebanon, if he continues with this war, he is going to achieve the limited objective of taking them out for the time being, but it's not going to achieve a lasting peace. That being the case, why is this escalation? And the timing is also questionable because, as I mentioned yesterday, everybody was looking for some kind of a ceasefire for hostages deal because everyone wants those hostages back. There are around 100 hostages. So to know about the why aspect, I would like to go and look at what happened from July this year. But in July, in third week of July this year, Netanyahu came to US. He addressed the joint session of Congress. And generally, the vice president being the head of the Senate normally will attend that joint session of Congress. But this time, the current vice president, Kamala Harris, did not attend that joint session of Congress that in which Netanyahu gave a speech. So that must have really hurt Netanyahu's ego, and he must have been really disappointed and to an extent even angry that Kamala Harris did not show up on that particular session. Then there is another incident, this time with President Joe Biden, when the reporters asked Joe Biden on whether Benjamin Netanyahu is doing enough to get the ceasefire for hostages deal done. President Biden bluntly said, no, he is not doing enough. So that was the first time I think a US president has come out publicly to say that an Israeli prime minister is not doing enough for the peace process. So that must have also hurt Benjamin Netanyahu's ego. Then it is a different story altogether that both President Biden and Kamala Harris met Benjamin Netanyahu during the trip. The next day, I believe, in the White House, they met Benjamin Netanyahu individually. They were not together when they met Netanyahu, but still, nevertheless, they met Netanyahu. And then Netanyahu also met with Donald Trump in Florida. So they had a closed door meeting. So if you look at all these events, we all know that Donald Trump is very transactional. And we also know that Benjamin Netanyahu is also very transactional. Because if you look at Netanyahu's coalition partners, he keeps changing his coalition partners in Israel. He just wants to be in power. He can align with any party, extreme right, right. He doesn't care. He just wants to be in power. So he's also a very transactional person. And with respect to Donald Trump, everybody knows that he's very transactional. You can just look at how he treated Michael Cohen, and several other examples are there. So everyone knows that Donald Trump is also very transactional. So when two people who are inherently transactional, they meet on a closed door session, and you don't know exactly what kind of backroom deals that they had. But we do not know what happened inside the room, but we can also look at actions after that. After that meeting, you see we have from July 25th onwards, I think, you see a constant escalation in terms of Israel engaging with Lebanon, and every day you get some news, and he was not focusing on the actual deal to release the hostages. So if you look at all of this, it looks like there is something transactional that happened during that meeting with Donald Trump. But but how is that going to affect or help either one of these candidates? So if Netanyahu continues the war with Lebanon and also within the Palestinian territories or within West Bank and Gaza, it will be on the front page of the news, and that is not going to look good for the current US administration, especially Joe Biden. So Joe Biden will look weak. Joe Biden will also look like someone who is not able to get the diplomatic deal done. And that could be a narrative that Donald Trump can use on the campaign trail, and he can very easily tie Kamala Harris to that failed diplomatic initiative, and that could potentially pay him dividends in the electoral process. And that is what I think is happening right now, in the sense that even though that there is a legitimate case that Benjamin Netanyahu can make to say that he needs to go into Lebanon to neutralize those Hezbollah forces, the timing was very suspicious. First, everybody wanted this deal, so everybody wanted the war to end in Gaza first, and they wanted to send medical supplies and other aid to the people suffering in Gaza. That was the top priority, pretty much for everyone in the international community. So instead of focusing on that, he's opening up another front in terms of going into Lebanon. Makes me wonder that there is something more to it than what we see. So that is why I feel that Benjamin Netanyahu, through his actions, is trying to somehow affect the US elections. But you also need to look at the local scenario in Israel. Most of the Israeli opposition forces were forced to basically support Netanyahu because they cannot go around and say that we don't support this offensive into Lebanon. Then they will be perceived as weak, and you can very easily see the similarities between what happened in September 2002 in US, where the Bush administration was planning to go into Iraq, and the Democratic Party did not know how to confront that, and they didn't have the kind of courage to go and say that they are not for this war, except for 2 or 3 people. Everybody got in line behind George W. Bush's policy, and eventually they went to war with Iraq in March 2023. So similarly, in Israel right now, the opposition forces, they know that Netanyahu is doing this for his own political needs, but they cannot come out and say it openly. So they have to support Netanyahu, because it's always the conventional wisdom to support the current administration during the times of war. And that's what the Israeli opposition forces are also doing. But remember, We are also looking at a guy, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is ethically challenged, who is morally challenged, and who is also legally challenged. He has got a lot of cases against him. So once this war gets over, he needs to face those legal challenges, and he also needs to face the kind of intelligence failure they had on October 7th last year. So all these put together makes me wonder that he is doing this for just for his own political survival, as opposed to doing something good for the country. And the other issue is, even if he wins the war against Hezbollah and he goes and neutralizes those forces, what next? I mean, are you going to get peace through war? It's not going to happen. So, what is the ultimate solution for this issue in the Middle East? It's actually a negotiated settlement that's agreed to by both parties, and that definitely involves a two-state solution. But Benjamin Netanyahu will never accept for any two-state solution. So that's why he is trying to do these kind of actions, which will eventually delay his departure, in the sense that he will eventually be voted out, but we do not know when. So that's what he's trying to do. And by doing all this, from my view, he is indirectly affecting the US elections. That's it for me today. I'll come back to you with a different episode tomorrow. Till then, take care.